Hello, welcome to the PHONEWORD.org Registrar Workshop for Wednesday, June the 18th, 2014. It's almost 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and today we're going to be talking about full-stack JavaScript, in particular mean stack, and why that looks like the best tool set of choice for. Hello, this is Jay Carpenter, and this is the PhoneWord.org Registrar Workshop for Wednesday, June the 18th, 2014. It's almost 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and today we're going to be talking about full-stack JavaScript and the mean stack in particular, and why this seems to be the tool set of choice for creating a platform for the next generation of naming, addressing, and numbering. So thank you for joining, thank you for watching, and just to kind of recap, we're having 2 workshops per month. One is on the second Wednesday of the month, and this one, which happens to be on the third Wednesday of the month, are basically covering the same topics, but they're staged at different times to allow people from different parts of the world to participate. So just to kind of give everybody a little bit of background, this is a testbed, let's say, for creating a new set of naming, addressing, and numbering elements that enable the delivery of communications and media throughout the world. And the PhoneWord.org was, and this initiative was primarily sparked by an initiative that was started by the Federal Communications Commission back in January. And there was actually a numbering testbed workshop that was held in March the 25th of 2014 at the Federal Communications Commission, and I'd like to give everybody just a little bit of an update of what's occurred since then. Well, what has occurred is there's been a group that's been formed, an Issues Management Group, or an IMG, and that is within the North American Numbering Council, and the IMG's purpose is to sort of monitor what's happening with this initiative for testing and experimenting with numbering. However, there hasn't been much activity since the workshop. There's been, other than the IMG forming, there's been effectively little to nothing that's happened. There was a meeting in Denver, I believe in early May, and there was a little bit of discussion at that point, and some of the representatives from the Federal Communications were there for the ATIS meeting. ATIS is the Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Standards. So the bottom line, the other entity that is involved with this endeavor is called the Future Numbering Working Group, which is also within the North American Numbering Council. Bottom line is there hasn't been much activity. So the industry in general is just basically kind of on hold, awaiting some sort of further direction and instruction from the Federal Communications Commission in terms of, okay, what do we do next? What do we take on next? There are some entities that have expressed interest, including PhoneWord, in participating in these test numbering trials. However, other than these workshops and what PhoneWord is up to, there's been very little activity as far as I can tell. There is some activity going on with the Internet Engineering Task Force in terms of trying to set up a standard for identity and security and access and that sort of thing. However, that's taking place at the IETF level. and is somewhat detached from the North American activities for the numbering test bed. So, all that being said, there was a significant development on Friday, last Friday, which was the Federal Communications Commission had an open meeting. They did talk about the trials, the all-IP trials experiments that have been proposed by AT&T. And you can watch that by going to the fcc.gov website. However, in my view, there wasn't really much that was said or much of substance that was presented other than, hey, AT&T's proposed these trials. It looks like we need to make sure that the trials are doing what we expect them to, and we also want to make sure that the trials are aligned with the, let's call it the network compact of consumer protection, public safety, competition, and I can't remember the fourth one, but basically what the FCC considers to be the consistent, long-term, compact for networks and communication activities. Competition, consumer protection, public safety. Anyway, they've got 4. So the bottom line is there hasn't been much activity. So where does that leave us at this point? Well, first of all, these workshops are meant to be technical workshops. This is different than another event which I'm associated with, which is called the PHONEWORD Forum. And the PHONEWORD Forum will be on the last Wednesday of each month. The next one being, I believe it's the 25th of June, and that will be an open forum. 2 times a year we have an open session in December and June. So there hasn't been much activity. The PHONEWORD.org, which is what we're talking about today, is going to continue having these workshops and developing a platform that can be used, can be trialed, can be tested along the lines of the initiative to create a new realm of naming, addressing, and numbering. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that what's called the old copper network, or the legacy copper network, or the time division multiplexing network, or the public switch telephone network, whatever you want to call it, let's call it the landlines that people used to use almost exclusively for telephone service to their houses, that whole system is in the process of being retired. And it's uncertain as to when that retirement will happen, but I assert that that retirement will happen sooner rather than later, and it's happening now with or without any sort of initiative by the, let's say, the governing bodies and the regulatory bodies and that sort of thing. It's happening on its own, and it's happening for multiple reasons and dimensions and forces. So that is happening. It's, basically, whether it happens with regulatory direction or not, it is happening. So what does that mean for naming, addressing, and numbering? Well, naming, addressing, and numbering is entering a new realm, because the naming and addressing and numbering is happening in the internet or internet protocol space. So even though there are things that look like telephone numbers. In reality, once the public switch telephone network goes away, the question is, are they really telephone numbers? Because really what we're experimenting with the PHONEWORD.org initiative and the platform that's being developed and so forth is really fully qualified domain names. So that are entered in a fashion that's akin to a telephone number, but it's really a fully qualified domain name. And I know that's that's my assertion. That is something of a, well, I'm sure it's a very controversial standpoint to take. However, I'm confident that that is really what is happening with numbering, naming, and addressing. Is we're really talking about internet protocol or internet IP network constructs, and the only thing that we're talking about with the legacy telephone network is if things don't work in the IP space, then we fall back to the legacy network, at least for as long as it's still operating. So that's the basic premise of PHONEWORD.org and what this initiative is all about. The last week on June the 11th, you can watch the session from last week, and you can see what was discussed regarding the full stack JavaScript and mean stack approach to creating a platform that is aligned with and designed for this new realm of naming, addressing, and numbering. So I'm not going to go over that in great detail today. However, let's just quickly review the presentation in case you did not see it, and in case you're wondering what was discussed. And I'll bring it up on the screen at this point, and we'll talk about it a little bit. And okay, so this is the presentation from last week, and the presentations for the workshops will cover both sessions for the month at this point. And our agenda was talking about mean stack, which is MongoDB, Express.js, AngularJS, and Node.js, which in my view is the contemporary tool set for web development and platform development going forward. We talked about the pros and cons of the mean stack and pros and cons of full stack JavaScript. We talked a little bit about dialable rich media and next steps and conclusion. So won't go over that in great detail. It's important to keep in mind what the essential elements and intentions are for PHONEWORD.org. A is to introduce something that is easy to use, that is as easy to use as dialing a telephone, and is also secure. And I talked about how those two things have been at opposite ends of the spectrum. You would trade one for the other up until this point. And we also talked about some of the elements of maximum end-user value. I won't go over those at this point. You can watch last week's session to cover those. So moving forward, this is a description of the mean stack, and we covered that pretty thoroughly last week. Won't go over it again, but JavaScript has emerged as the language of the web, and everything we're talking about is web-centric. It's separate. More and more we are moving away from individual devices, and we're talking about a method of communicating, connecting, interacting that is ubiquitous. So in other words, more and more we're using multiple devices, multiple ways to interact with one another, and the full stack JavaScript, the web-centric connectivity just moves that momentum forward. So mean stack considerations, I talked about the value propositions of JavaScript, the momentum, how it's agile, how it's fast, the cons. Well, it is new, it's a very different approach, and there are still things in development that are significant. I had hoped to have some code to work on by today, and it is the intention to have code, something that works, something that you can go to on the web and experiment with. That's been pushed back to next month, next July. Well, this next month, which is our first session, I believe, will be July the 9th. And it is the intention of these workshops to have actual code that works, that can be experimented with. Again, here are the workshops that are scheduled. The next month's workshops will be on July 9th and July 16th. There is a working website at PHONEWORD.us that you can go to right now, and you can see a working dialer that does connect, does make a call on that website, and that's will be further expanded as we move forward. There is a GitHub repository set up for hosting the code going forward. Excuse me, and of course there will be more resources added to www.phoneword.org as this moves forward. Here's a view of the experimental site, and you can see the dialer, and there is some other just template functionality associated with this site, but this is where things will be developed moving forward. So there are 3 levels of participation with PhoneWord.org in this initiative: commercial registrars, sponsored registrars, and general participants. And you can go to www.phoneword.org and get more information on these 3 levels of participation. I talked about this last week as well. And I would encourage companies that are currently in communications and media delivery and internet services to look at the PhoneWord.org initiative as an opportunity to not only play with technology, but also with new business models and new policies that are designed to usher in a new realm of not only naming, addressing, and numbering, but also a whole new realm of connectivity among everybody on the face of the earth. So, and that involves policy, it involves business models, and it certainly involves technology. So the next element is collaboration. Again, this has been, we're still in the building stages of this, at the very defining stages actually. However, the intention is to create a community that is collaborative around PhoneWord.org and the initiative of creating something new that is a new way of connecting. So the question always is present: what do you want? What can serve your needs as a participant, and how can that be fulfilled by you spending your time and resources with PHONEWORD.org. Next steps, again, second Wednesday of each month, 5 p.m. Eastern, which is 9 p.m. GMT, and the third Wednesday, which is 11 a.m. Eastern and 3 p.m. GMT, we will have these workshops to encourage participation and work in a collaborative fashion to create the technology, the policy, and business models that are part of the initiative to go forward and move everything into an internet protocol network realm. So here is the contact information for PHONEWORD.org, and feel free to contact me at any one of these addresses. Follow us on Twitter, and that is basically it for today. So thank you for watching the recording, your attention, your time. I invite you to join us. You can do that by going to www.phoneword.org, and thank you for your interest. We are really out to, excuse me while I change the screen. All right. So I'd like to conclude today by just saying that, you know, this is something that's new. It's way new. It impacts some of the most profound elements of our society, our culture, etc. Not only in North America, the United States, but around the world. So there hasn't been much participation up until this, well, to this point. And there are the notion of collaborating in something that's this fundamental is very foreign to many of the traditional enterprises, organizations, people, etc. So it's really not that surprising that this would be, let's say, starting with very little activity. It's also been very conceptual to this point because there hasn't been something that's working, something that people can actually put their hands on and use and see, how does this thing work? What are you talking about? However, I assure you that this is moving forward, and that this is part of something that's taking place on a fundamental level of many, many elements of our culture, our society, our commerce, our activity that we experience today as human beings. So I'll conclude with that. I do invite you to join next month. Keep an eye on the Twitter feed, on the social media, LinkedIn, etc. And with any luck at all, we will have some code for you to play with and move this forward as we progress. So thank you for joining, and look forward to your participation in the near future. Thank you.